following program is a peer-to-peer advice show and does not diagnose mental health conditions. If you're seeking social services, please call or text 211 or go to 211.ca. Hello, listeners around the world on radio, streaming, and podcast services. This is It's Not Therapy. I'm Liana, and I am not a therapist, but I am your source for navigating the madness of mental health, using my top 10 sayings for checking in with your best self. This week, we're talking about daily mental health maintenance. This episode is because I managed to get an interview with the one, the only Howie Mandel. Yes, Howie Mandel. Mental health maintenance was what Howie wanted to talk about, and that's coming up in a bit. Howie does have a new podcast with his daughter called Howie Mandel Does Stuff, so check that out. But first, as usual, I set the table. As I talked about last week, when I was struggling in the past, the people around me told me to go to therapy. The expectation back then was that therapy would fix me, meaning it would make me normal and less of a problem, whatever that means. Only a small percentage of people have a mental health condition that means they're actually divorced from reality. For most people, therapy is about identifying patterns that need to change. If you don't make changes in your day-to-day life, therapy plateaus in terms of how much it helps. It only took me 15 years to figure that out, which is why I got into my current line of work. I want to save people that 15 years of their freaking life. When I was a teenager, therapy actually made things worse for a while. The therapists, well, I'm going to go on a limb and say they messed up. They didn't properly assess the situation at home before they told me to do certain things, before they said certain things to my mother, that my mother then, bless her, panicked, felt shame about, and then ended up taking that shame out on me. Now, a therapist ideally considers the home environment when involving the parent of a minor, but that didn't happen in my case. Multiple times. Now, my biological father, on the other hand, actively exploited therapy. He doctor shopped family counselors until he found one he could manipulate, and that temporarily increased the amount of coercive control he had over the rest of us. Obviously, this did not help, and I'm telling you this as a cautionary tale. You should not feel pushed around in therapy. You should feel challenged, not bullied. This is why finding a good fit with a therapist is so important. But the challenges go deeper than that, which is why I'm a big believer in peer counseling. We talk a lot on this podcast about the 3 parts to mental health: biological, psychological, and then social or environmental. Biopsychosocial, right? Medication deals with those biological elements. A therapist tends to these psychological elements, the internal work that you can do one-on-one or in the privacy of your own brain. Someone like me, I'm focused on those environmental itches that the other things don't scratch. Because change is there sooner would have saved me 15 years of my life. That's a bit of an exaggeration, but only a bit of an exaggeration. My environment was so bad for so many years that I didn't know how bad it was. So even when I made it better, it was still pretty awful. It was only after a clean break, no contact with a lot of people, that I got my life partially back, as well as 2 career changes and the diagnosis of an autoimmune disease. What I do for a living now helps me as much as it helps my clients. It gives me the opportunity to be the person I needed and didn't have. For instance, I have a client whose grandmother does not respect that they have a severe allergy to animals like dogs and cats. It's an issue with others in the family, but grandma's the biggest issue in terms of just forgetting that their grandchild has a fairly severe allergy to her dogs. Now, a lot of therapists would say something like, you need to set boundaries. And yes, one of my top 10 phrases is that other people don't have to like your boundaries, but they do have to respect them. But family of origin can be a setting where setting boundaries might be impossible if you're dependent on your family for the basic necessities of life. As a peer counselor, I understand this element of the situation in a way a therapist may not. How does the client set a boundary in this instance? I suggested in this case a medical awareness alert card. Now, I'm most familiar with these cards for people who are deaf or have autism. They're cards that you can hand people that outline in pre-written friendly language what the issue is, so you don't have to explain it again and again, and you don't have to make a scene. The client thought this was a good idea and is going to pursue it. It's outside of the box. It's a concrete suggestion. Therapists often don't do that, and there's a good reason for that. A client can tell me when something isn't working with less sense that I have the ability to deny them care by not signing a piece of paper. Because I'm not a therapist, I can make suggestions as an equal, not someone who's diagnosing a person and therefore has power over them. And that power is very real. In healthcare systems based on referrals that require proof that something is medically necessary or at least medically recommended, those gatekeepers hold a huge amount of power over a person's well-being. Without someone like me to do additional strategy with, additional preparation with, rejection from those authority figures can be catastrophic. Now, I'm not an authority figure. I'm a peer, hence peer counselor. I come at it from firsthand experience, and one of the things I have firsthand experience is how hard setting those first few boundaries is grammar. But if you don't set those boundaries so that people can respect them, it's very hard to ever feel truly cared about. Now, every person's path is unique. So they need to be able to get a daily routine that helps them feel secure, in a reasonable amount of control, and reasonably cared about. That's how you navigate the madness of mental health. And that's what I talked to Howie Mandel about. We'll get to my interview with the one, the only Howie Mandel after this break. Not Therapy Show. Liana at nottherapyshow.com is my direct email. Send me an email. Got lots of emails this week. That was awesome. Or you can fill out contact form. It's the same as an email to me. Go to nottherapyshow.com, fill out the form there. Join our mailing list while you're at it, or social media at Not Therapy Show on X, that's Twitter, Instagram, and Threads. Howie Mandel after the break on It's Not Therapy. The following program is a peer-to-peer advice show and does not diagnose mental health conditions. If you're seeking social services, please call or text 211 or go to 211.ca. We're back on It's Not Therapy. I'm still Liana Kersner. I'm still not a therapist. And we are talking to the one, the only Howie Mandel. Everybody knows Howie Mandel. But right now, Howie's doing a podcast called Howie Mandel Does Stuff with his daughter, Jacqueline Schultz. Howie, thanks for coming on It's Not Therapy.
Thank you. All
right. So there's a lot in previous interviews about you and mental health. I find that it's very sliced and diced. You know, one touches on ADHD, one touches on OCD. Where do you want to start in getting people to understand you as a whole?
Understand me?
Yeah.
I don't need you to understand me. I think my whole soapbox is understanding yourself.
Okay.
I had no idea that, these things that I have been talking about, and I only talk about it, and I'm sitting here today for the same reason, is there's a stigma involved in, even mentioning mental health out loud. And, I had pretty late in life was forced to go get help. I wasn't getting help, but I was always dealing with whatever it is I deal with. There are some titles to the things that I deal with, but I don't think there's anybody alive that doesn't have to deal with something. I think I always say that I hope people take care of their mental health the way they take care of their dental health. Your teeth may not be bothering you today, but you're going to go get a checkup and a cleaning and an x-ray. And I just think that people need to check in, and whether it's dealing with the stress of a relationship or work or becoming a parent or being told that you have some sort of illness or somebody you love and care about dies. We all need coping skills for life. So it's just about coping, and I've just been kind of open now accidentally, but I found out accidentally that it's actually better to be open about it. But that sharing is caring, and these are my problems. I don't need other people to know that I have issues. I'm not embarrassed to talk about issues, and I think the biggest problem with our community and the world today is mental health. And I think mental health is the answer to everything. I think if we took care of our mental health and people felt, and didn't have to self-medicate and become alcoholics and addicts, and if they could cope with whatever life throws at them and didn't become extreme or extremists, there would be less violence, more productivity, more happiness, and just more of an understanding of each and every person.
Yeah, one person said to me that we spend a lot of time and resources getting people from like non-functional to barely functioning. And then it's like, well, you're on your own. And what have you found? Because I mean, you went 40 years without a diagnosis, correct? You must have been getting some things done.
Right, and I really suffered, but the truth of the
Yeah.
matter is that what I'm hoping in at least to see in my lifetime is when, as I said, taking care of your mental health the way you take care of your dental health, at least, you're saying you get somebody non-functioning to the part where they're functioning. I even think a functioning person, needs, you need to go to the gym. So you need to go to the mental gym. You want to find little tricks and little ways to make things easier mentally for you to cope with stress, to cope with anger, to cope with productivity, to cope with the feeling of maybe feeling overwhelmed, to cope with the feeling of grief. We're all going to die, and I'm not here to give you to spread any news, but we're all going to know somebody that dies. We're all going to get. How do you cope with even that kind of knowledge? So I just think it's up to each and every one of us. And I do a campaign for Bell, Let's Talk. I think that, that's the first and foremost way to kind of give us a safety net, and you're doing it with this podcast, is just to talk. So listen, if something is an emergency and you get yourself to where you can't function, or you're ideating, things that are not great, then you need to get to a point where I can function. It's up to each and every one of us on our own to do whatever we need to do to maintain.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not up to, a doctor, a healthcare giver, a family member to chase you to maintain. It's up to you to maintain. And just like you want to maintain, you don't let your teeth rot out of your face. Don't let your mind rot out of your head.
I think a lot of people do have that idea of, well, I'll just take a pill and it'll make it better for physical health as well as mental. And I know that you've said in the past, you don't want to talk about what works for you because, somebody will hear, well, it worked for Howie, it'll work for me, and sometimes it won't. I think that's accurate. How did you find out what worked for you, though? What was part of the
What works
process?
for me now may not work for me tomorrow.
Right, right.
These are a constant. You have to maintain. You have to. You can't drive your car, for 300,000 miles and have it maintain its efficiency without oil changes, without checkups, without changing the. So, like, even if I am right now, in therapy and on medication as we speak, but my body chemistry, just because of natural aging, changes, and whatever I'm taking may not work as well, a month from now, from when I talk to you. And I have to be open and aware and verbal to the people that make these decisions, and they'll say, oh, well, let's try something else, or there's always an answer, there's always something to try, and there's never a you flip a switch and you're fixed and that's it forever and all time. That's just not how life works. But that's not how life is. whatever you're doing right now and however you feel right now and whatever environment you're in right now is temporary. Where life goes on. We're always constantly changing, aging, getting better. So you have to take care of your mental health the exact same way.
That means being self-aware, doesn't it? I mean, that's the tough thing, is constantly assessing, is this working? It's crushing when all of
Well,
a sudden,
it's
say,
a
a medic,
self,
yeah,
but it's got to be as self-aware as you get up in the morning and brush your teeth before you go to bed. You got to be aware that maybe at this point your breath stinks, or
right,
you
right.
you got to take care of it. You just, if you brush up on your mind and then you haven't taken care of it, yes, it's just not part of our curriculum, not part of our discussion, not part of every day. You could sit in a corporate office somewhere and say, oh, my back is out, and everybody will hand you a card to their chiropractor. You can't see, I don't think it's as common to sit in the middle of a corporate office and just go, I don't know what it is, but I feel like I'm just going to start to cry and I can't do any work and I can't focus. And nobody will say, well, talk to my psychiatrist, or why don't you take some time off, or let me take you to a therapist. It's not the same thing, but it should be. It's just another function of humanity.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people think, oh God, I could never talk about what I was going through at work. That's part of the problem, isn't it? Right? That we all say, oh, mental health is very important somewhere else. And I think
Well,
that
even from a corporate standpoint, from insurance, you can't get. I mean, you're in Canada right now. I'm here, but even in Canada, you can't get the same coverage or taken care of the way you can for your physical health as you can for your mental health, because they can't see an X-ray. There's no black and,
mhm,
you know, it's just nobody understands it
yeah.
equally and puts it on the same, gives it the same weight as, and it's kind of interesting, even in our societal view, even when you pass a homeless person in the street, a good portion of those people are mentally ill. If you had a friend of mine tell me this analogy, but it's true. If you're walking down the street and in front of you, a stranger trips and hits their head on the curb and there's blood everywhere, you'll probably use your phone and call 911, and that person will be picked up, taken to a hospital, and even here, and taken care of in the ER. If a stranger is walking down the street and they're totally filthy and they're screaming out obscenities and weird things, people avoid them. Why isn't that? Just because you see blood, you want to help, and there's an intake for them. If that's their mind bleeding when
Mhm.
somebody's sitting there rocking, crying, and screaming, you want to avoid that and ignore that. And that's kind of a great template for our society. We ignore it.
Yeah.
And
I think a lot of people are afraid to make it worse. I know with the stigma on suicide prevention, that's what I hear a lot. Oh, we don't want to talk about it because we don't want to make it worse. As somebody who did finally get help because people were like, no, you need to go. What's a way to intervene, to do what you said? Because I think you're right that,
just be
being on the
aware.
receiving end of
Just
it.
be aware and talk about it. Just be aware. Why wouldn't you call 911 for somebody sitting in the street rocking? Why wouldn't you? Why am I on a podcast talking like this instead of just around the dinner table? Around the dinner table, people talk about, I don't know, my back is out and we're moving in 2 days. I'm going to see I don't know why I can't move. But you know what? I think I'm going to have a what's it called when you get your teeth?
Root canal?
I think I'm going to have a root canal, or I'm going to go, it's not right. I'm going to go buy Invisalign and my teeth are all crooked. They'll talk about everything except that organ, our mind.
Right. So it sounds like what you're advocating is normalization of talking about this stuff before it gets really bad.
No, all the time. It
Hmm.
should be ubiquitous. It doesn't have to be bad to talk about it. It just
Hmm.
should be normal. It should be part of our everyday curriculum, in schools and 5-year-olds, there should be something in place where they can ask a set of questions or just talk and realize that this human is not reacting kind of healthily, or the way other people, or maybe there's something going on at home, or what, like identify it then.
Howie,
Not, go ahead.
Howie Mandel, I'm trying to respect your time. Howie Mandel does stuff with his daughter, your podcast with your daughter, Jacqueline Schultz. Howie, what can people expect from the podcast when they tune in? What is that?
I never know what to expect, but really interesting, awkward, uncomfortable, funny, informative, at least hour of from people you know, from people you don't know. Anything could happen. This week I have Mel Beyond, who I'm working with, from the Spice Girls.
Yeah.
She's back to AGT, so she's on this week. Everybody from Bill Burr to John Edward, the psychic, to but and just fun, crazy, informative, where it's just stuff, whatever you want to put under the category of stuff. And it's me and my daughter, just so that's what makes it sometimes awkward, but
sounds like you're practicing what you preach. It's just people doing stuff. Sometimes it's awkward, sometimes it's funny. It's just life.
Yeah, and go to howiemandel.com and subscribe and comment. Subscribe. Even if you're not going to listen, subscribe. It'll be fun.
That's a good lifeblood for podcast subscriptions. Howie, thank you so much for your time, and keep being great.
Bye-bye.
All right, Howie's people are whisking him off to something. Busy guy. Awesome to have time with him. When we come back, I'm going to expand on this idea of preventative mental health care. Liana at Not Therapy Show, at nottherapy.com. Fill the contact form, join our mailing list, or at Not Therapy Show on X, Instagram, and Threads. Be back with my mental preventative checklist, otherwise known as my top 10 phrases. The following program is a peer-to-peer advice show and does not diagnose mental health conditions. If you're seeking social services, please call or text 211 or go to 211.ca. We're back on It's Not Therapy. I'm still Liana Kersner. I'm still not a therapist. And before the last break, I was talking to the one, the only Howie Mandel, and how we use the useful, I think it's useful, comparison between mental health and going to the dentist. The idea that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. I use a different metaphor. I call it mental health nutrition. Same concept presented in a different way. You go to the doctor when you're sick, but if you don't eat right, get enough sleep, and exercise, your physical health isn't going to be good no matter how many doctor's visits you have. I designed my top 10 phrases as my mental and emotional diet and exercise routine. They're my check-ins to make sure I stay on track. Because right now, I'm good crazy. If I neglect my routine, then the PTSD kicks in again and I become bad crazy. So let me show you what I mean by going through my top 10. Here's how they work for me. They're going to work for you differently. You're going to get your own. Personalize this up the wazoo. Number 1, don't let problems that aren't your fault lead to mistakes that are. This is my reminder that I don't have to fight the world. I don't have to see every interaction as a reflection of the bad stuff that was done to me. If someone is rude, condescending, or abusive, that's on them. But if I take the bait and react, especially don't react well, that's on me. I tell myself I can feel hurt, frightened, angry, or embarrassed by something without having to outwardly react. And feeling bad doesn't mean I'm doing something wrong. That includes myself and other people. Also, walking away is and must always be an option. Don't let problems that aren't your fault lead to mistakes that are. My second top 10 phrase is core values are more important for relationships than common interests. Now, I used to think, because I like weird stuff, that anyone that liked the weird stuff I like must like it for the same reasons I like it. And that is not so. Then I thought I had to stay stuck with a bad group of people that I didn't even like because normal people wouldn't accept me. Guess what? Normal people don't accept me. because I don't have normal core values. But that doesn't mean I had to accept the bad treatment by not great people. A central thing for me is that if I have to choose between being liked and being respected, I pick being respected. And that means that I'm eventually going to clash and have a falling out with people who need to be liked. Now, it isn't that the people who need to be liked are bad people. They just have incompatible core values. And it's better for me to stay friendly arm's length, because otherwise I'll end up thinking that they betrayed me, and they'll end up thinking that I'm too rigid and can't get along with people. And we'd both be right. I don't get along in close relationships with most people because my requirements due to having PTSD are too much for them. I accept that, and I don't place blame. I have some great friends that accept me for who I am and share that view of the world through a prism of respect first. And yeah, some things I'm totally uncompromising on. Everyone I'm close with is like that. That's why we get along without resenting each other. We all have our lines that don't get crossed. Everybody happy most of the time. Now, that definitely doesn't work for everyone. And I don't see myself as better than people who need things a different way. It's just how I need to be. It's impossible to be besties with everyone in the world. That's an impossible goal. And this segues into number 3, top 10 phrase: healthy goals are based on things you can't control. Rule number 1 of trauma therapy: control what you can control. Stop trying to control things you can't control. That's why you're stuck. I tell myself this at least once a day, usually multiple times a day. I can control effort, accountability, and moderation. I can't control outcomes, especially the outcomes that involve the opinions of other people. No, really, you can't. Trauma makes the question, what's the worst that could happen, result in a really bad answer, because we know how bad it can get. So the whole idea, instead of going, what's the worst that could happen, because the answer is bad stuff, the idea is to stop things from getting big and overwhelming. And basing your self-worth on things that are based on the subjective and sometimes arbitrary judgments of other people is way beyond your control. Cut that out. We all want people to like us. We all get really, really invested in a particular outcome sometimes. It's unavoidable. Part of this is because we do get attached. We sometimes get enmeshed. But also, no one's perfect. And this is why I have these usually daily personal maintenance checks, because the next one is about perfection. Perfect is a lie. Stop trying to be perfect. We all say no one is perfect. Then we try to be perfect. We shouldn't be making plans that require perfection for them to work. It just so rarely happens. If the people around you are jumping on you every time you make a mistake, they're not your people. That sometimes includes your family. Unfortunately, your family of origin can be not your people. Sometimes the frustration is understandable, but if you're terrified of making a mistake because someone is just going to pounce, no matter how well-meaning or innocent the mistake is, they're not your people. We will all have moments where everything goes right. No, really, these moments are just extremely rare. That's why learning to be compassionate with ourselves, even find it funny when we make mistakes, things go wrong, or we get an outcome we don't want, is an essential life skill. You may notice I have a very self-deprecating sense of humor. I am very in touch with my flaws and contradictions. Sometimes that's good. Sometimes it turns into beating myself up. And that's where my 5th top 10 phrase comes in. Self-esteem cannot exist without self-compassion. This is a daily grind for me. I do beat myself up. I am hard on myself still. I'm a lot better than I used to be, but I am still rough. And I know that people find me too difficult to deal with in those moments. So most of the time, I just shut my mouth and ride out those rough bits. Sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes I still have a bad moment where people can see and I get criticized for it. And I tell myself that people might criticize me for my low points. While they may criticize me, I work really hard to not criticize myself. And that is a massive change for me. I used to think that it was responsible to just beat the mental and emotional crap out of myself, trying to get to my brain before everyone else did. I thought it would hurt less. The thing is, that advanced beatdown, it doesn't work. And I eventually realized it doesn't work. It doesn't make it hurt less. So I started working on changing that. And yeah, I have a disease. I have multiple diseases, in fact. So I'm no one's trophy or dream girl. I get ignored a lot, passed over, dumped on. And so do most people. I wouldn't be much good to the people I work with if I didn't have it really, really hard. I know a lot of people who are luckier than me, but I'm not sure they're happier than me. And they're definitely not as good as helping other people learn to be happy, precisely because they don't see how lucky they are and they don't see the parts where they have it easier. Now, would I like to be luckier? Yeah. Would I like things to be easier? Definitely. Sponsors, I am here. But do I work with what I have instead of begrudging those who have it easier? Definitely. Definitely. And that's what I mean by self-esteem cannot exist without self-compassion. And that's 5. Going to take a break. After we come back, my remaining top 10, Liana at nottherapyshow.com. Questions, comments, concerns, anything at all. Or if, you want to book a session yourself, nottherapyshow.com or Not Therapy Show, the website. Oh, I'm getting tired. My mouth isn't working anymore. Join our mailing list, Not Therapy Show on X, Twitter, Instagram, and Threads. Be back for the final segment on this episode of It's Not Therapy. Mental health maintenance, daily maintenance for your mental health. Preventative care when we come back. The following program is a peer-to-peer advice show and does not diagnose mental health conditions. If you're seeking social services, please call or text 211 or go to 211.ca. We're back on It's Not Therapy. I'm still Liana Kersner. I'm still not a therapist, and we're still going through my top 10 phrases, which is my version of mental health daily management. It's like diet and exercise is to going to the doctor only for your mental health, inspired by my interview with Howie Mandel. So we did the first 5. We're going to do the back 5 now. So number 6, other people don't have to like your boundaries, but they do have to respect them. That's why they're called boundaries. Now, no lie, this one is hard. It's possibly the hardest of my top 10 phrases because it's not nice. You have to be tough. You have to stick to your guns. It's the one that most directly involves other people, meaning there are going to be falters. You are going to mess up. When someone tests your boundaries and limits, eventually those limits fail. And that's why I put the self-compassion. Self-esteem cannot exist without self-compassion before we get to boundaries. Keep in mind, true loved ones support. They don't try to control. And I can hear you snorting. I can hear you snorting because so many of us feel controlled by the people who love us. Do you test that? And I'm not saying you should test people ongoing, but that's what boundaries are. They are check-ins for the relationship. You can't really ever say yes if no is not an option. And your emotional house will never be secure if you feel like you have to keep every door open because somebody is just going to kick it down. You can't figure out what you want if other people are constantly telling you what to do. And this is what makes boundaries so hard. Most people do test them, at least at first. A lot of people do not understand boundaries because, again, learned skill. None of this stuff I say happens naturally. None of these top 10 phrases. That's why you got to repeat them to yourself. People do test and bust your boundaries either accidentally or on purpose. Now, in some cases, it's just we forget, we make mistakes. And that's why a boundary is not a limit. You've got to set your boundary below your limit so you don't explode on people. It's an early warning threshold. Everybody forgets sometimes. I do, and I apologize. I step on things. I use a turn of phrase that I forget a client because I work with a lot of people. Even though I make notes and have big scrawled things on somebody's file, I miss it sometimes because I'm distracted or I'm tired or I just mess up. It's a lot to keep track of. And I apologize. And that's enough because it's a boundary. It's not a limit. But boundaries can be very close to your limits, especially at first. And when something's raw, it's impossible to stay outwardly calm when someone stomps on that sensitive point. Boundaries are not fun because they involve being 100% less nice than you want to be. And I say this as a person who doesn't hold a ton of stock in being nice. Remember, respect over being liked, right? I hate setting and enforcing boundaries because it's one of those things of I'm the best at what I do and what I do ain't pretty. I know they're good for me. I know it's essential to me. So I know I'm going to be the villain in a lot of other people's stories because I say no, stop, don't, enough. And so I make them feel bad. Make them feel bad. You've probably heard this. You're making me feel bad. Too bad. Too bad in this case. I don't say that all the time. I do care about people's feelings. But if this person who's saying I made them feel bad didn't care that what they were doing was resulting in me feeling bad, why do they get more than I deserve? That's the rub, right? That's why boundaries and self-compassion are connected. Now, for people to respect your boundaries, they have to know they're there. It's your responsibility to communicate them. It's hard to learn at first how to state your boundaries, how to bring them up in a way that won't lead to confrontation. It's usually a question of, look, please stop doing that. Repeat it. Stop doing that. If you don't stop doing that, I'm going to end the conversation, for instance. It's always important to state what the consequence is going to be for not respecting the boundary. If they don't respect the boundary, apply the consequence. Because if you don't, it gets to the point where you don't even know where your boundaries are, never mind how to set them. Because what does it matter? People don't listen. People don't care how much it upsets you. Or they care, but they just keep going anyway. Because more agreeable people, nicer people, have weaker boundaries. And people like nicer people, right? It's not on the cards for me. I had to learn to say no. And I found out it's a pretty great thing. Okay, it's not great in the moment when someone's going off on me because they don't like a boundary and they don't understand that you can respect something you don't like. That's not fun. I know I used to be that person, which is why I set the boundary, which is why I set the top 10 phrase. Others don't have to like your boundaries, but they do have to respect them. That goes for you as well. You can think it's unfair. You can think they're being manipulative. You can think they're being controlling with the boundary. If that's true, why are you around this person? Remember, walking out, like I said before the last break, leaving always has to be an option. If you don't like someone's boundaries, you don't have to continue the relationship. But knowingly violating a boundary is just not okay. And here's why. Okay. Next top 10 phrase. Number 7, be the hero of your own story and not anyone else's. Remember I said that I end up as the villain in a lot of other people's stories? That's true. But I'm not the villain in my own story. Now, I spent a really long time feeling like a supporting player in my own life. I was acutely aware of this, but I didn't know what to do about it. That was the lost 15 years. I ended up breaking down, going bad crazy. I was a certified embarrassment, a failure, a complete disappointment to everyone around me, a burden. All of that was true, even though it was my worst nightmare, the thing I never wanted to be, all true. I was just annoying to everyone around me. They didn't want to deal with me. The difference between a superhero in one of the comic book stories and just that run-of-the-mill victim that's there and gone is that what I just said, that absolute low point, that end of the road, that is the end of a victim's story. But for a superhero, the worst moment of your life is your hero origin story. Because that's the point when you decide to control what you can control and do something about how bad everything is. The things you focus on become stronger, and you get to determine how you frame the things that happen to you. Now, if you've looked at your life and you realize you are the villain in your own story or your own worst enemy, change your behavior or change your story. You have that power. But I guarantee you, there's something deep down inside that you secretly or not so secretly like about yourself. That's the beginning. That's what you build from. That's your power. And it even can be being nice. You can make nice work for you. I work with some guys. They are legit nice. I marvel at how nice they are. I don't know how it's possible. We work with that instead of trying to change them because that is their superpower. But that power, that determining what reality is for you, that only extends to you. You are not the hero of somebody else's story. Trying to be is not going to end up in a good place. Other people need to be able to set their own goals and take their own risks. If you're taking responsibility for other people's choices, everything that goes wrong will be your fault. You don't want that. Let other people stand on their own. It's actually quite selfish to try to be the hero of someone else's story because it's driven by people pleasing, often rooted in abandonment issues. If someone needs you, then they can't leave. But they're not choosing to stay either. So the minute they get any sort of power, they do leave. Because resentment bred. They had no choices, and they associated you with that lack of choice. Be the hero of your own story, not anyone else's. Number 8, listen twice before you talk once. I love this one. This is one of my favorite ones. They're all my favorite ones, but this is an extra favorite one. Effective listening is the key to effective communication. Really listen. Don't just wait to talk. It's great. It's a learned skill to really hear what someone is telling us. Not what we're afraid of, not what we think they secretly mean. What they're telling us. And only work based on that. Now, I have to talk for a living. Let me tell you, talking is so overrated compared to listening. Not only are people who ask more questions seen as more likable, but listening allows you to collect information so that when you do talk, it's more accurate and impactful. Yeah, okay, I say this as an introvert, bias declared. But again, these are my top 10 phrases. They don't have to be yours, but hear me out here. Let me make my pitch. If you're constantly talking and rarely listening, you're not maximizing the attention you're getting. You're so busy talking. You're not taking in the praise. You're not taking in the fascination. You're not taking in the validation. You're not taking maximum comfort from the people around you. Also, talking's terrifying. Come on. At least for me. No, it's true. I speak from a more comfortable, assured place when I've had the chance to listen to information first. That's why I use a lot of client stories, because that's just me taking it in, right? When you listen twice before you talk once, you avoid mistakes, you maximize the effectiveness of your message, you take in the support, and you end up doing way less work. So what did that person say? No, really. What did they say? Not what you read in, not what you added or removed because of your own emotions. What did they say? Repeat it back to them if you want to be sure. I find this so invaluable. Moving on to number 9, because time is short. Ignoring negatives isn't being positive. A positive outlook means actively looking in the direction you want to go. When you don't feel like you can say you don't like something, you lose that sense of direction. Yeah, into each life some rain must fall, but it's smarter to bring an umbrella than to just get wet. Every moving part of something, and social interactions are full of moving parts. Life is full of moving parts. Every single one of these parts is both useful flexibility and a potential point of failure. It's important to know where the weak spots are. And it is possible to identify those places without catastrophizing. This sucks is the first step to making it better. Just don't get stuck in it sucks. And finally, my 10th top 10 phrase is the way I sign off this show every week. And I'm going to do it this time. I've made the distinction between good crazy and bad crazy all episodes, so I'm not going to belabor this too much, but basically, good crazy is the things that make you a unique, special, and cherished individual. They're the things that make you take risks that are good for you. They're the things that drive you forward to try to beat the odds, even if you might fail. That's good crazy. Bad crazy is the stuff that keeps you stuck, unhappy, unfulfilled, your emotional needs not met. It can even make you cut off from those emotional needs. And that hurts you. So I sign off the show the way I do every week. Your crazy is only a problem if it's hurting you. See you next time.